Hey guys, welcome to Spirit Pig. This is the show that explores how to live a fulfilled life. I'm Duncan CJ, and today I'm talking to Kingsley Dennis, PhD. Kingsley is a sociologist, researcher, and writer, and is the author of several critically acclaimed books, including The Phoenix Generation, Meeting Monroe, New Consciousness for a New World, Struggle for Your Mind, After the Car, and the celebrated Dawn of the Akashic Age. I had to actually look Akashic up on Google to work out. I was like, how do I pronounce it? And I had someone speaking to me on YouTube saying Akashic, so I've got that written down. And that was
maybe I did as well. I Googled
it. And that's with Dr. Irvin Laszlo. He currently lives in Andalusia and continues to research, write, travel, and grow his very own vegetables. Kingsley, thanks so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
No, Duncan, it's a pleasure. And when you got in contact with me and said you were Spirit Pig, I thought, how can you turn down that offer to chat with Spirit Pig?
I know.
Great name.
Thank you. You received your doctorate. You were teaching at a good university. You were successful in your field, but in 2009, you kind of thought, I'm going to leave this all behind and kind of jump into the void, I think your expression was. What fueled that decision?
The decision, almost leave it all behind. I wanted to do what I wanted to do, basically. My aim was to concentrate on the writing, on these particular ideas. But of course, when you work in academia and in a particular subject, you are more or less constraining what you publish, So if I published what I wanted to publish when I was doing this sociologist thing, and people look at me and say, well, you're not going to get any academic ratings for that, We've got a 5-star department here. So I decided, well, if I didn't give it up now, my career, to concentrate on what I really wanted to do, i.e. those books you mentioned, then I probably wouldn't do it for another 30 years. Because once the career got too on track, you got too much to give up, So I know people say, some academics, they wait until they're near retirement and then they write what they really want to write and say what they want to say. But I didn't want to wait that long.
One of the books I really want to delve into today is, I think it's the first one I mentioned, The Phoenix Generation. What is the Phoenix Generation, first of all?
Rising from the ashes.
Rising from the ashes.
Yeah. Well, basically, it's talking about the new generation of people being born around now. I mean, it's not that specific, this year, no. But, a bit before, but around now, because this generation will be the first generation to be born into a fully digitized world, okay, where we'll be interacting differently with the world around them, with the technology, with the not only the internet, but a world which so many borders have gone down, so many people are cross-connecting. This connected world. I mean, I think we're on a cusp of a planetary society in a good way, not in a Borg way. But, this generation will be the first
a planetary society in terms of what? Not dictated by what countries and borders, but what? Just a one? Is that what you mean? What does that mean, planetary society?
Well, in a sense, yes. Not really dictated by nation states or empires. The age of empires is gone. I think America's trying to hang on and still hassle the world. But in a sense, because we're so interdependent, we need resources from this country. We have so much trade integration. We have so much riding on it. If one country economically collapsed, it would have a domino effect. We're so integrated that you're not going to have any one empire controlling the world like before. The model has passed. But also, it's the people, the capacity and the empowerment of the people and the way they're sharing information across time. Space and time is being condensed into the now. So with that happening, earlier waves, they had part of that. But now you see everything's changing there. What's important for our jobs? What's important for the meaning of life? Where I want to live and work? We're in a much more mobile world. And it's the first generation to experience that. And what I've noticed is that also they're displaying more empathy, because they're connected to people that perhaps they haven't even met. Someone in a let's say Middle Eastern country, but they empathize with them. And so that's a kind of intuitive feeling that's arising a lot through the Phoenix generation. So that's why I wanted to focus on them, because they're just an important generation, so important.
Yeah, and you think that this change in the 21st century and that we're going to see is as equivalent and dramatic as sort of the flat Earth to round Earth shift in terms of it's that big a sort of paradigm shift? that's
Yeah,
coming
it
up.
is. And I actually stated that, people might think, oh, flat earth to round earth, that's a big thing you're saying there, Kingsley. Are you sure? But it's a big thing, but it's because what's changing most, and this is the biggest player, and you need it for any big shift to occur, it's the change in our perceptions and consciousness. If you think differently and you have a different perception of the world around you, then you're going to have change. You can have so many different systems, systems change all the time, but if the consciousness behind the system hasn't changed, you won't really get the incredible scale of change.
One thing which I found really, really interesting is that when you're saying about this future generation, the emphasis was on connection, communication, and compassion, as opposed to competition, control, and censorship. So we're moving away from this idea of sort of dog eat dog, everyone out for themselves, like censorship, control, actually to this communication, this compassion, and that's a really interesting shift.
Yeah, and it's going to happen anyway because of the way we're connecting facilitates that. And obviously, communication we're doing now, and the consciousness, because we know that we're not just on our own in our nation state. We're all, the ramifications of this interconnectedness is quite powerful. So it's going to happen anyway. But the question is, how quickly or how smooth it's going to happen? Because that's the question. Because, we can make it more painful for us if we're still hanging on to the older systems and the old thinking and the old emotions and energy. Or we can accept that this change is coming and participate in it.
Yeah.
So, it's like the ride is there, but you're gonna have a bumpy ride for yourself, or you're gonna make it an easier ride for yourself.
I can't remember who it was. It was one of your. I don't know if I've got it written down, but it was somebody who wrote like a foreword for your book, and you're saying how this change is coming, as certain as tomorrow's sunrise or sunset.
I think Larry Dossey wrote that.
Yeah, I think that was interesting. So it's not a matter. I mean, I think that what the debate is, the debate's not whether this is happening. It is happening, but it's how you respond, how you adapt, how you embrace it. Yeah,
exactly. I know, and some people's natural criticism is that, well, okay, in some areas, yes, but what about the corporate world and business? They're not going to change because they've always been that way, because they think it's going to change overnight. And my response is, well, certain change is going to be slower than others, but that real change comes from within. So when you get a younger person in, let's say, 15 or 20 years' time, they enter that business organization and they sit in the seats where the old guard are, they're going to change it from within because they're in a position to do things with their new thinking in the business. So you get that natural kind of organic evolution, so it's going to happen because the people are coming and they're going to be sitting in your chair doing it.
Yeah. And so it's actually, this whole, the Phoenix generation, I mean, it's a deeply, because often change is seen, we've talked a few times on this show about change and how actually we perceive change, and often we resist it. But actually this is a sort of a deeply positive thing, isn't it?
It is deeply positive, although it may not look like it. And the analogy I give is that, I give the analogy of a drowning person, is that, when someone starts to drown, they start making all this, obviously, gasping and shouting and flapping around. So you see them from the beach because they know they're going down. But the lifeguards say, unless you're professionally trained, we recommend you don't go and try and save them, because when you get there, they're so panicky, they grab onto you and they pull you down with them. And that's what's happening with the older systems. Now, people are, the governments and all the people who are invested in the older systems, they're making a lot of noise now to make a lot of fear and to really emphasize, their so-called power. But I look at it the other way. They're making noise because they know they haven't got much time left, and they'd rather pull you in, distract you, all the tales of the warfare and all these media manipulations. So we get worried as well, and we think, who's going to help us, and you go back to the support systems. But it's just, it's like a distraction mechanism. We've got to stay with the understanding the positive, despite what we see around us, maybe to the contrary.
Yeah, and we're moving much more towards the empowerment. I think you mentioned the empowerment of the individual, and so of each human being. So the rise in social media, peer-to-peer lending networks, all these kind of peer-to-peer kind of like communities, this is showing that the shift is actually on the individual person rather than the organisation. Was that what that was?
That's exactly so. And, you know, people have been talking about the masses, and usually the masses had a negative connotation. The mass of people, they get manipulated, they don't have any, free thinking. But really, I think we're going to go through a revolution in how we perceive the masses. The masses now are going to be individualized as well as coming together. Each person can have their voice. So, we're not just consumers anymore, we're prosumers. We produce the content, we produce the media. That's like you're doing right now, Duncan. We connect with people, we do the projects. We don't just sit there receiving it, passively. Yeah, feed me. No, we're doing it. So that is what empowers individual. And when you come together, like in social networks, in peer-to-peer networks, in open source arrangements, each individual then can bring something. So the mass is greater than the sum of its parts.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I like that. And another quote. I love this one. It was by Buckminster Fuller, and he was saying how we don't actually fight the existing reality. We need to create new models that make the existing reality obsolete. So it's actually not about. It's not beneficial to try and fight wrong or equality necessarily head on. We need to actually be more savvy in actually how we approach these things. Because in the old days when we would just like do protests, that was actually often that actually just gives more emphasis to actually the cause. Or what was that connection?
Well, that's a great quote, and I've used it quite often. It is exactly as you say, is that usually when we're faced with injustice or something that obviously is against our better interests, we protest. It's a human right to protest. Now, before, that was perhaps the only way we had, and the energy around in those times supported the protest. But that energy is changing because, as you say, when we fight the system head on, that gives the authorities reason to put further constraints on us. They can say, "Oh, look at them! They're unruly. They're doing protests. We have to have new laws to control them." So we're playing into their system. But the energy now, because of technology and education and awareness, and we can communicate and share that, we then can just connect with the people and say, "Well, let us do our own thing." So instead of banging straight on with a brick wall, we go around it, do our own thing, and they probably won't see you coming either.
Sneaky.
Yeah. And then there's another example which I give, which is a great example from nearly about 100 years ago. It was in 1906, and there was a British statistician called Francis Galton, and he wanted to disprove the power of democracy because he thought that the people are dumb, and government should give people the power to vote because they're not worth it. So he went to a country fair in the UK. This is in 1906. And the country fair had a huge ox. And what they were doing was they were raffling tickets. You pay a penny, you get a ticket. And on the ticket, you write down your guess of the weight of the ox. At the end of the day, let's see who wins. So this guy, Francis Galton, he thought, well, this is a great example to show you that people have no idea. So I'm going to collect all the guesses, and I bet you nobody can guess the weight. And it was his idea. And he was right in that none of the guesses were anywhere close to the weight of the ox. But then he took it a second stage, and he found that when he added all the numbers together and took the average, it was spot on. 1,397 grams or ounces, sorry. I forget English weight at that time. It was spot on. So like no one knew individually, but everyone knew together.
That's incredible. So So the collective, actually, the knowledge in the group actually was, that's so interesting.
I mean, it may be, you can say it's a fluke, but I think it's also a great analogy to show how we are working now. Is that there's so much coming through us being together that being together, being a mass, is no longer a derogatory thing. It's a thing of empowerment. Yeah,
absolutely. And there was you're talking. I heard it. I think it was a video talking about the book, and I have to say this slowly because it was like when I was reading, it was almost like a mind like messed with my mind. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
Did I mess with your mind? Sorry, man.
Yeah, but it was you were discussing like unfolding recognition of other realities existing beyond the confines of our three-dimensional material reality. And so you were saying something like, it's not just about inner worlds and outer worlds, but they're also other worlds that occupy a zone that we're touching upon but are unfamiliar with. When we said that, I immediately was thinking the film like Interstellar. Like, is this kind of what you're talking about? That would have made, if any of the audience are listening, they're probably thinking, I literally have no idea what that question was. Could you maybe just elaborate on kind of what I was badly trying to say?
Well, very well put, Duncan. Yeah, I mean, the end, you refer to like the end of the book where I talk about multiverses. The idea that, more and more people, especially the younger generation, are going to accept the existence of other realities or other ways of thinking about our universe, and that we're not alone, and that we are living in a living, intelligent universe. But you see, science is almost going there, it's almost getting it, not quite yet. But the idea that we are an accidental anomaly created by the fusion of chemical elements hurtling through dead space on the back of a barren rock doesn't work for me, mate. And so now some of the latest quantum science are realizing that, in fact, they are starting to agree with the holographic idea of the universe, is that the universe that we see around us, the time and space and matter, is actually, obviously, quantum science tells it's all connected. But it's all connected, but it's not the primary. It's a secondary projection. The primary is, let's say, the quantum vacuum or the plenum or the cosmic, they call it consciousness, if you wish, which is beyond space and time. And that projects materiality like a hologram or matrix. So, in fact, our universe is just one particular projection. And that reality, material reality, is a secondary manifestation. The primary is consciousness. So when you start to understand that consciousness is primary, it changed almost everything. It's a game changer. And we think it's strange, but a lot of young people are understanding that and they're getting it. It's the same, of course, of course.
So is that linked with when you're saying consciousness is primary and then the material stuff is secondary? Is that the same as, like, for example, you look at a chair or a table, but that must have once existed as a thought in somebody's mind in order to then become a material thing. So is that kind of the connection between the primary and the secondary, or not?
Well, I mean, of course,
do you know what I mean in terms of
I mean, in those terms, of course, most things that we have created were first a thought or an imagination or an idea. There's that element. But from a scientific point of view, it means that science tells us that all the matter is just atoms spinning around, okay? And the space between atoms is huge. So, in a real life terms, the atom may be a golf ball in the middle of a football pitch. All that space in between is the space between atoms. But we can't go through because they're spinning so fast. But go beyond atoms, then you get quarks. And then you even go beyond quarks, and what you get is just spinning energy. So the basics of material things around us is spinning energy. So, of course, matter isn't primary because it's energy. And so again, it makes sense, but we just need enough people to actually understand it, not just nod their heads, but understand it. And then when we can feel that we're living in an energetic reality, then that does change the whole perspective.
It's so interesting. Because I until about a month or two ago, I did not know really barely anything about quantum physics, mechanics, but slowly but surely, I mean, it's a theme that's starting to come up a few times in a couple of the recent interviews, and it's fascinating. Like, I still have completely not got my head around it at all, but it's just hearing these ideas. It's just, it's crazy.
And we know so little. Dark energy, what they call. Basically, in space, something like 95% of space, we call it dark energy because we have no idea what it is. We can't see it. We only infer it from secondary causes, There's a ripple in space, so therefore it shows that there's dark energy. So 95% of space, scientists have no idea what it is or what its function is, which is same as the human DNA. 96% is what they called, they used to call it junk DNA. So like the whole human body is a wonderful result of 4% of your DNA. What is this 96% doing? So we know so little, so let's just kind of be a bit more humble. I would suggest.
That's crazy. And yeah, it's not that another thing is that it's not that our current reality is because this was just an interesting way of phrasing it. Because when you hear things like this and about changes and the Phoenix generation and the end of the old systems, it almost sounds like the old system is breaking down. The current reality is breaking apart. But you described it as it's actually often about other energetic realities actually breaking through, and thus like requiring us to reconfigure and recalibrate how we perceive and interpret reality. So it's not about everything is just breaking down. It's about these new ideas actually coming through, which is just such a cool way to describe it.
And you hit the nail on the head with that. We have to reconfigure our understanding of reality and therefore our consciousness to deal with this. So it's not about breaking down. It's about actually we're going through a revision, a revolutionary vision, because everything is in process. Hundreds of years ago, if they looked into the future about what we have now in technologies, it'd be like magic to them. You can't conceive it. How can we even conceive what's 100 years down the line? We can't. But unless you can accept that we need to revise our modes of thought and our perceptions, we're not going to get anywhere. Everything's a work in process, and humanity we're not human beings, we're human becomings. We're a work in process.
That's so good. And now, change of tack. Like, you're now living in Spain. I think you're learning to grow your own vegetables in your garden. That's awesome. I think what an amazing story, which I heard of Francis Assisi, which you wrote about, was Francis Assisi was once St. Francis Assisi was once hoeing his garden, and he was asked, "What would you do if you were suddenly to learn that you were going to die at sunset today?" And he replied, "I would finish hoeing my garden." I love that. I think it was such a cool story. So I mean, with that in mind, I mean, is that why you're living in Andalusia, you can see behind you got like the green trees in the background. Is this part of that? Just you're really living your purpose. You're loving what you do. You're writing. You're traveling. Is that is that kind of what that's about? Yeah,
it is. It's about finally coming to a point where a person decides to do what they really wish to do, and so it's about finding meaning for yourself. That can apply in all different ways for different people. I wouldn't advise the 80% of the world of the people just to jump stick and then find a place in the country like I did, because you can't copy me. I can't copy you, Duncan. Everyone's got to find it for themselves, but you've got to find your own meaning. And if you can find meaning, then you can really start to have joy in life.
Absolutely. And that might have answered my next question. What does a fulfilled life mean to you?
You probably did answer it, yeah. To find your own meaning and to follow it.
Yeah, brilliant. And what is one thing all our listeners can do today that will have a massive positive effect on their lives?
Stop believing.
Wow, that one's never come up before. I like that. Because when we believe, we're stuck in our ways. Is that why? And we're not open to other ideas? We're not open-minded? Or is that what you mean by that?
Yeah, what I mean by that is when we believe something, it means we don't know it. That's why we say we believe. If you put your hand in scalding hot water, you don't believe it's hot, do you? You know it's hot. Our beliefs are structures that we've accepted and we've taken on board, and they become our paradigms, but most beliefs actually are limiting, not freeing. So to be, to know, not believe.
That's incredible. And are there any books or resources which have changed or had a big impact on you?
Yes, as a young man and still today, I would suggest the books and resources of Idris Shah.
Idris Shah? Who is Idris Shah?
He was a spokesperson, writer, educator for a body of knowledge that he brought from the East to the West specifically, and which was generally known under the label of Sufism, but a modern stream of this understanding.
Okay, fantastic. I'll check that in the show notes. And last but not least, how can people stay in touch, find out more about you and your work?
Well, Google my name. I'm fortunate enough to have a name which is quite rare, so I'm top of Google. I have a website, kingsleydennis.com, I have a lot of articles on there that are all free to download and videos. Just come and share the space, do your reading, do your homework, and take your time. And I'm just happy to be able to share.
Thank you so much. This has been, I loved it. It's been absolutely incredible. I've been, as in some of those things still, like I need to work on them, like in terms of just understanding things. And I mean, I think in terms of quantum physics, I've got years ahead of me of trying to like get my head around what on earth it's about. But it's a really exciting, it's an exciting sort of area, which I definitely want to find out more about.
So you don't even have to understand the actual mechanics if you just understand the significance. I mean, one of the great pioneers in quantum mechanics, I'm not sure which one said it, but he said, the father of quantum physics, if you say you understand quantum physics, you don't get it.
Wow.
Which is a bit of a paradigm because that means you can never quite actually get it.
Yeah, incredible. Yeah, so it reminds me of something else. When somebody said, like electricity, like you don't need to know how electricity works, but you can still like use it, you come to boil an egg, to turn on the lights, and so you don't actually have to understand like the actual logistics. So I'm not, you've answered that. That's made me relieved because I knew that.
Just plug into it. Just plug into it and then go.
Amazing. Kingsley, thank you so much for talking to me today. It's been absolutely fascinating. I've loved it.
It's been great, Duncan. Thank you for getting in touch. Again, thank you, Spirit Pig, and enjoy every second.